Welcome to 1920s post-war America, cultural and economic boom years. This is Melinda Cole Klein. For most of the decade, the 1920s represented to most Americans a time of hopeful promise of a better future in the post-war period. This decade was characterized as a time of bathtub gin, speakeasies, organized crime rings, and the boyish look to young women's fashions, emphasized with straight-line physiques and short haircuts. It was a time of prohibition that did not alter American drinking habits. All the while, young women entered the workplace and enjoyed a more relaxed approach to dating. This decade would see the popularity of the radio used in homes, to the shift from silent films to talking pictures. While entrepreneurs built taxis and buses that ferried people and goods across town or farther afield, the sale and use of the automobile by the private sector left an enduring mark on American culture and society. A new prosperity in America was evident in a rising standard of living, urban transportation efficiency, electrification, and modern plumbing. Millions of homes and apartments were built with the latest in modern living conveniences. Telephones in the 1920s were a novelty and only a luxury item for many years until the 1930s and 1940s. Material innovations included the invention of plastics, rayon, and cellophane, creating new products such as matches, with new cigarette lighters available to consumers. Other new products included Pyrex glass, popular in kitchens and scientific labs. And then there was the advent of dry ice. From the 1920s, Americans began a tradition of creating new spaces for individual activities, such as going to the bathroom. By the 1920s, American bathrooms had cast iron tubs with a new type of flush toilet that was made of enamel. Enamel as a finish became popular for not only toilets but tubs and wash basins too. By 1925, American factories made 5 million bathroom fixtures a year. The American bathroom, provided with hot water, privacy, and clean white fixtures that did not break or rust, symbolized the society as affluent and a sharp contrast to post-war European countries. In America, the middle class enjoyed more time with family and friends, had a shorter work week, and enjoyed a healthier diet. Higher education increased in the years preceding the Great Depression, as 1 out of 7 high school students went on to college by 1930, as with compared to only 1 in 10 by 1900. Electricity in homes, businesses, and in society in general changed how people lived their lives. From the 1880s, America experienced a second industrial revolution, hallmarked by electricity. By the 1920s, it achieved its heights with new innovations to include, but not limited to, the following. Number 1, labor-saving gadgets for the home, including toasters, electric irons, washing machines, better sewing machines, and early vacuum cleaners. Number 2, electric generators to move machines and power around cities. Number 3, electricity in 2/3 of American homes, in the cities by 1919, rural by the 1940s through the 1960s. City dwellers and the middle class experienced the rise of the standard of living before the poor. people living in rural areas, and the working class. In addition, with the rising standard of living and new electrical appliances, women's work did not become easier. Daily drudgery over laundry persisted. All the while, the American standard of cleanliness rose, creating more work for women to keep their families fed with the latest recipes using their new ovens. Electricity symbolized hope, progress, and a higher standard of life. From the 1890s in America, corporations merged their businesses to create larger companies in efforts to dominate markets. In 1929, there were almost 2,000 mergers in that 1 year alone. One of the biggest mergers of this time was in the automobile industry, in which what was created is remembered as General Motors, consisting of Cadillac, Chevrolet, General Motors, Pontiac, and Chrysler. Others were DuPont Chemicals, General Electric, and U.S. Rubber. The need and desire for the freedom in America to drive a car either for leisure or to get to work or to school affected the national culture. America, undoubtedly, is a car culture. By 1929, there were 20 million registered cars on American roads. Like railroads, cars created the need for oil, automobile repair shops, tooling companies, and gasoline stations. In addition, drivers needed roads, uniformity of codes to driving and negotiating the roads. These are the laws. And even, in time, traffic signals. More importantly, drivers got hungry and tired. For the weary traveler, accommodations were built along new highways in America. The motel, the corner market, and diners. These were mom-and-pop type eateries. How has the car culture affected American society? This is a broad question, and the one that will be evaluated in this course through the 1950s, when the impact included new fast food chains. Families began moving out of inner cities in favor of new homes found in suburbs. This led to the growth of new towns, economies, and population shifts. For the unemployed during the Great Depression, thousands of families lived in their cars as a house on wheels. Families began traveling together using their cars. Gasoline was inexpensive, and the Model T proved to be an inexpensive way to see America. Unlike railroad travel, it allowed families to be free in choosing their destinations. State parks and camping with elements of fishing and hiking took on new meanings. The car, for the family, became, in essence, an educational tool. The car changed dating. Young women could be with a boy out of sight of her parents. She could go for a ride with him in his car or truck, promising to be back later. While most parents then and now balk at this situation, most young girls jump at the chance for such an opportunity. Cars consumed a large portion of the family's income. However, with the help of Henry Ford, car prices were reasonable for many, and car lot dealers offered installment plans to working men with stable jobs. During the 1920s, consumer goods offered purchasers the ability to live better. The economy was stable in the post-war years, and many Americans purchased on credit. It would be during the 1920s radio stations would abound, as if developed overnight. By 1922 in America, it has been documented that there were more than 500 licensed stations at the time. Radio stations then and now survive through advertising. and quickly radio turned into a vibrant industry broadcasting news and entertainment. An offshoot of RCA, RCA stands for the Radio Corporation of America, in 1926 we would see the creation of NBC, the National Broadcasting Company, with CBS, the Columbia Broadcasting Systems, formed 2 years later. While radio had advertisements, it was free entertainment, discounting for the cost of electricity to run it. Early radios had headphones. An improved radio contained speakers, taking it from an individual form to a radio set in a cabinet like a piece of family furniture. Americans purchased not only cars, but washing machines, electric toasters, vacuum cleaners, and the latest time and labor-saving devices. After the war, this cultural tendency to possess the latest and greatest was advocated on the radio and in print. For Americans of the modern era, they were consumers with a seemingly insatiable hunger for material goods. For rural Americans, the Sears catalog was the Amazon.com of its day. In a Sears catalog, you could order just about anything you needed for the home, farm, or business. In 1924, Sears Roebuck and Company purchased a radio station. The radio station was not only a hit, but company-owned, so it advertised its own products. According to the Sears archives, the station offered to listeners, quote, farm and weather reports, music, tips for housewives, and evening entertainment, end of quote. While the Sears Company only owned the station for 4 years, it became, quote, the most popular radio program in the Midwest, end of quote. According to advertisers on the radio and in print, beauty and sex appeal were possible if the right products were purchased. Americans, past and present, have been bombarded with advertisements. According to historians of popular culture, 4 factors attracted and still do attract the American consumer. This has not changed over time. These factors include elements of sex appeal, personal freedom, speed, and cleanliness. While marketing companies persuaded Americans in the latest product, 40 million Americans made their presence known every week by attending the movies. This statistic is from 1922. By 1924, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer moved from New York City to Hollywood, California, a sunny place to film all year round. By 1929, the number of Americans going to the movies rose to 100 million. Early silent films came from Europe, had no subtitles, and were quiet. Early films influenced an American population with modern ideas, behaviors, practices, and material wealth. For the most part, until movies included sound, this would begin from 1927, moviegoers were blue-collar workers, factory workers, wage laborers, in general, the working class, not wealthy patrons. Early movies with sound were called talking pictures, or talkies for short. While partial talking and subtitle films continued for a while, Warner Brothers Studios put out the earliest of the talkies. As early as 1925, this Hollywood company began experimenting with the new technology of synchronized sound. While the first talkies included music but no dialogue. The Warner Brothers sound invention they called the Vitaphone system. In 1927, with The Jazz Singer, Al Jolson Sings. This film was a national hit. Hollywood made such an impact with sound integrated into film, By 1929, European film companies made the shift to talking pictures. One of the early directors of talkies in Britain was Alfred Hitchcock. While Hollywood, California would become the leading film industry headquarters, European film companies made quality films in London, England, Paris, France, Belgium, Germany, Poland, Italy, Sweden, and Austria. In Asia, the film industry was a sensation in Japan during the 1920s and 30s. Actors that did not make the shift were those with heavy accents, such as some European actors and actresses. Sound was cutting edge. Because of sound, plot lines would become more complex. This element in movies created a shift from the simple but entertaining silent films to more complex films in storyline. In addition, actors with speaking parts had to be up to the task. And of course, this new American industry employed a variety of people across the country when films were shot. In the 1920s, the world became a smaller place with radio and telephone service circling the globe. The radio would contribute to bringing the world to American homes. By the 1930s, the radio was the most important home appliance and the center of the family living room. This activity became an after-dinner listening requirement for family members, and they were entertained and also heard the news. During the 1920s, both game makers, the Milton Bradley Company and Parker Brothers, invented radio games. The National Game Company manufactured a bingo radio game. By the 1920s, the Illinois toy manufacturer Tinker Toys made a tin and wood child's toy radio. Other commercial items featuring the 1920s radio phenomenon were radio candy containers and radio banks. When American fashions of the 1920s come to mind, instantly the image of the flapper appears. Short hair, smoking cigarettes, drinking alcohol, casual sexual encounters, straight-line dressing without corsets. Women did have more sexual freedoms in the 1920s. They lacked chaperones and had more opportunities to meet boys casually. Kissing, it seems, was prevalent, but information about contraception or birth control was illegal. Family size for middle-class families declined during the 1920s. After the war, couples tended to marry for love first instead of financial responsibility, to which financial failure and instability was common. Women's home lives were shaped by new home appliances and innovations in home utilities such as hot running water, cold water, interior bathrooms, washing machines, and above all, electricity running small appliances, such as irons and toasters. Women entered white-collar occupations in great numbers, working as telephone operators, secretaries, and typing clerks. From the 1880s, this has been a growing trend in the feminization of the clerical field since the transformation of business practices since the 1870s. Like in previous decades, these jobs hailed the following. Number one, respectability, but were low-paying and offered little opportunity for advancement. Number two, management jobs belonged to the men, and this and Western European society has dictated that men are decision makers. Women were the helpers. This hierarchy in business between men and women existed in the business office environment for decades. Number three, the upside for women that for working in an office offered good opportunities to meet an eligible man. In her diligence to be a good worker, women learned endurance, obedience, order, and procedure, qualities a man would like to find in a woman for his wife. In 1928, President Coolidge did not accept the offer to run for a second term. In his place, Herbert Hoover was chosen to become the next Republican Party candidate. Hoover was popular among Republicans because of his political experience, his character, and likability. In addition, he supported prohibition. This election year was set in a time of a booming economy, and Democrats were split politically, including on issues of religion and also prohibition. A reformer in his politics, Hoover promised, quote, "We in America today are nearer to the final triumph over poverty than ever before in the history of any land." End of quote. Within months of taking the office of the presidency, the stock market crash of 1929 occurred. While the crash did not cause the Great Depression, it set into motion events that would. Hoover is remembered as the president who could do nothing to alter the U.S. economic decline. But he did do the following, and I'd like you to remember the following points. He signed an act that made the Star-Spangled Banner the national anthem. Hoover spearheaded the prosecution of Al Capone. His administration created national forests and parks, adding about 6 million acres to this effort. The Hoover government created tax reductions for unemployed Americans, built 50% more hospitals for veterans. President Hoover and his government improved air mail carrier service, made available loans to clear slums, helped to fund the building of the San Francisco Bridge, organized the Federal Bureau of Prisons, Department of Education, and a branch for Indian Affairs. The president campaigned for pensions for Americans over 65 years of age. This was President Hoover.